right, so I'm so pleased to be here with you today to talk about a lot of what we know about how to be our healthiest, best selves under any circumstances and including with challenges in our lives. And so, as was mentioned in my very kind intro, I've been practicing as a clinical psychologist for more than 30 years. And my current practice is right up the hill here in the UF Spring Hill office buildings, where I treat people who have depression and anxiety and who've experienced trauma. So let's talk about how any of us can be our most resilient, healthiest selves. And I'm going to see if my clicker works. Oh, it does. I can point it anywhere, apparently. And here it will go. And so today we're going to discuss some ideas about how to be our emotionally healthiest, best selves. And we're going to learn 5 resilient skills. And so by the time we leave today, everyone will have learned 5 skills that they can take with them to be their best emotional selves. And I've brought a resilience tool for each of you, the blue card. That's usually what we call it, the blue card, which hopefully everyone's gotten a copy of. We have plenty of them here. And that's the culmination of a lot of knowledge about what it takes to be our best selves. And so I'm using the word resilience, and that gets used a lot, but what is resilience? And so actually there's even how to be a resilient city. So there's 7 characteristics of being a resilient city. And here in Florida, there are things like having redundancy. So if a hurricane comes, it doesn't knock all of your power out. There are many ways to be resilient as an individual, as a community, perhaps as a city. But I put a palm tree here on our slide because I did have a picture of an oak tree. And oak trees bend a little bit, but then they just topple over, right? So that's not where we're going. We are really following the model of a palm tree that can bend but not break, that can weather even difficult circumstances and can recover. And so being resilient doesn't mean having no difficulties in our lives. It means being able to manage through them, to bend but not break, perhaps to be strong and stable as we can be, and to bounce back. And that bouncing back doesn't mean to any particular place. It's to whatever our current or new normal might be. So this applies to everyone. So I know you're all eating. Let's see. I know you're all eating. And so if you don't have food in your mouth at this moment, I'm going to invite you, and I'm certain you're breathing even if you're eating, but I'm going to invite you to take 1 or 2 slow, deep, rhythmic breaths with the exhale longer than the inhale. So we'll breathe in. You might imagine breathing in calm and breathing out tension. Exhale longer than the inhale, in through the nose, out through the nose or mouth. Breathing in calm, breathing out tension. With that exhale longer than the inhale, please proceed. I'm going to cover these again or summarize them at the end. But even a couple of slow, deep, rhythmic breaths with that exhale longer than the inhale stimulates the soothing part of the nervous system. And so many of us in this day and time walk around with our fight or flight response going off a lot. It's sort of our nervous system's fire alarm, and it's really a fabulous response that's for a physical emergency. It's for a physical emergency happening right in front of us, like a car wreck or something like that. And we need that if we're going to have to, let's say a bear's running down the hall, and a bear is not running down the hall. But let's imagine a bear is running down the hall. We don't have to have a group discussion. What should we do? There's a bear coming down the hall. Let's take votes. We don't have to do that. Our body will start to respond. Our heart will pound and race. and we'll get our breathing rapid, and that's to get oxygen in and get it to the arms and legs for our fighting or running. That's the fight or flight. Metabolism will go away from our digestive system, so because we don't need to be digesting food while we're fighting or running from a bear. We'll start to perspire, which, you know, we're in Florida, so maybe that's happening anyway. But we'll perspire to cool the body, guess what for? The fighting or the running. That's exactly right. And our thinking will not be as focused because we don't need to do complex calculus when we're fighting or running. So you can see how all of these things happen in our nervous system and in our body for a physical emergency that's happening. So it's meant to be like a fire alarm that goes off infrequently, so not very often, and doesn't last a long time. But instead, many of us have that stress response system going off a lot of the time, and it is not healthy for our system, our whole body and our nervous system, to be having all of those things that I just described and others happening quite a bit of the time. So you have learned one resilience skill, and I know that sounds trite, but as I was mentioning, well, I didn't mention this, but I often work with people who are chronically suicidal and hurt themselves, self-injurious. I worked for the psychiatric hospital at the University of Florida for about 20 years. And so I've worked with people who have a great deal of distress, but I will tell them that the breath, the 5 senses, and grounding, which we're all going to be doing in a little bit, are some of our most powerful tools in terms of regulating our emotions and our body, and we have them with us all the time. So if you can't think of anything else to do, or even if you can, starting some slow, deep, rhythmic breathing without breath holding, and I bet you can guess what's next, with the exhale being longer than the inhale, will begin to calm and soothe your body. And so noticing how things are in our mind and our thoughts and in the body is also a resilient skill. Many of us are not really aware of what's going on in our mind. The equipment of the mind is built to survey the scene to keep us safe. And so our mind is built to sort of jump around, but many of us really do not haven't developed the skill of being able to notice our thoughts and manage them, and that is a skill which we can all get better at. Oh, let me go back to the breathing and let you know that there's science to show us that 5 minutes or more of slow, deep, rhythmic breathing most days can change brain function, brain structures, and can have a positive effect on your DNA. And so it's not going to change your DNA code. You're not going to change the color of your eyes or anything like that. But there are little chemicals that turn off and on the expression of your DNA, and doing focused breathing practices can make that healthier. So it seems small, but it's powerful, as many small things are. And so this resilience skill number 2, which I'm going to have us practice a little bit later on, is this awareness, and it's sometimes called tracking. How are things in the mind? Am I going a mile a minute, or is it a little bit calmer? And how are things in the body? And so I know that many of you in the room, probably all of you in the room, are experiencing MS or love someone who is. That's what brings you here. And so this can make this a little more complicated, but at any point in time, we can tune in to see what's happening in our body. I will say, if you tune into the body and it makes you feel distressed, if it makes you feel anxious, sometimes you can think about it like a pendulum, for those of us who remember grandfather clocks or clocks with pendulums that were not digital. So like a pendulum, you can notice perhaps the sensations in your body just briefly, and then step away and bring awareness someplace else in the body. And sometimes we try to find a place in the body that is neutral or pleasant. Think earlobe maybe, or drawing circles in your hand if that feels pleasant to you. And if we're sensing something in the body that's distressing to us, we might notice it, but then gently shift our focus to a place again that's neutral or pleasant in the body. So awareness is very important, and as I mentioned, many people are not aware of what's happening in their body. Another way to do that focused breathing, which appeals to many people, is to breathe to music. And actually, let's see, I didn't leave my phone up here. I queued up some music for us, so we may do that in a little bit. But many songs are a good length of time for a breathing practice. And so you would turn on the song of your preference, and most songs will work. I've even had some teenagers do this, and even if it's loud and fast, you don't have to breathe on the note because we're not trying to hyperventilate. But you just use it as a timer and a focus of your awareness. You just listen to the music and breathe slow, deep, and rhythmically with the exhales longer than the inhales without breath holding from the beginning to the end of the song. And we may do that if I did not bring my phone up here, but we may do that. I think this is a beautiful practice. And so this is just to show us how stress affects our bodies, and it affects every organ system from top of the head to tips of the toes. And again, as I was mentioning, that fight or flight response, when we think of stress, we're often thinking about stressors, the things outside of ourselves, for the most part, or perhaps within ourselves, that are the cause of stress. So the things that cause stress are not the same as our experience of stress. And so you can have two people who have the same or a similar set of topics that they're experiencing stress about or that they're experiencing, and the two people have very different reactions or experiences of the stress within themselves. One might be calmer while experiencing whatever the issues are, and the other one very distressed. And the distress is in the body. And so with that fire alarm going off a lot, we know now that produces inflammation in the body, and that is not good for any of us, certainly. And so, again, it's meant to be short-term and not very often. So we want to learn some things to help us notice, like the awareness. My heart is pounding and racing, my breathing maybe is more rapid, perhaps I'm having headaches, and some ways to help ourselves calm the body and the mind. And so we need to know what the target is. And so you might imagine or think to yourself, what does a calm mind feel like? And what does a calm body feel like? And most of us haven't ever thought of that before. So we really want to get the target for where am I going with this, or how would I feel if I was calm, if my body was calm, if my mind was calm. And so here, this is a concept I really like called the resilient zone. And so we're back to resilience now. So this is in the nervous system. Oh, my little pointer works. In our bodies, in our nervous systems, this is the zone of well-being when we notice when we're getting activated or agitated. We notice when we're getting droopy down here, and we have skills to help ourselves stay in this zone of well-being. So I love this is sort of the target in the body. However, this is how life happens quite a lot of the time. And so a trigger may happen, and that trigger might be something outside of ourselves. It might be a health crisis. It might be a thought. It could be a lot of different things. And so when the trigger occurs, we may react in our body and nervous system, and it might throw us in this high zone of activation. This would be the fight or flight, where we experience perhaps anxiety or irritability, sometimes increased pain, We might get thrown into the low zone here where we experience sadness, depression. We may isolate. We might feel fatigued and tired. And again, it doesn't say it on the list, but we may have increased pain. And so every person gets thrown out of their zone of well-being here sometimes. But it's a problem if it happens too easily. We're very reactive. Too frequently, we go up and down, or we go too high or too low and perhaps get stuck there. So now I'm in this low zone, perhaps distressed state, or up here in this agitated state. And so learning about the rhythms of the body and the mind and what a calm mind and a calm body feel like can really help us begin to identify when our body and mind aren't calm, and then use the skills to get there, starting with, I would suggest, 1 or 2 focused breaths or slow, deep, rhythmic breaths. And so how do we know how we feel? So I'm a psychologist, and so my bread and butter is emotions, you might think. And so people who come to my office to see me, every time they come, they fill out a questionnaire, every single time they come. And this has 16 items, and we graph their scores actually, so we see how they're doing visit by visit. So this is a screener that I'll give them to fill out for depression and anxiety, used all around the world. And so there's 16 items. How many do you think of 16 directly reference mood? Because it may seem like that's what we're measuring here, mood, depression, and anxiety. But see if anyone's brave enough to venture a guess. Of 16 items, how many do you think directly reference mood? How many? We have some zeros over here. Anybody else have a guess? Did I hear a 2 or 2 we hear here? You all are so smart. It's 3. It's 3. Generally, people are telling me, well, it's measuring depression and anxiety. It's got to be 16. But how do we know how we feel? We know how we feel through our thoughts, through our body sensations, and through our behavior. And so this form, 13 items about how you feel, are about thoughts, body sensations, and behavior. And actually, if you were to look in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, you don't need to know what that is, of mental health, and you look at the diagnostic criteria for depression, it's mostly thoughts, body sensations, and behavior. So that's really important to know. The emotion itself is the fuzziest of them, and we have habits in each one of these 4 domains of awareness, or sometimes we call it the diamond of awareness. So each of these places, and the emotions the least so, is a place that we can begin to make changes that will help have a positive effect on mood, including anxiety and depression. And so I said we have habits in each of these, and we may have difficulty in these, but we also can have resilience skills in each one of those same 4 domains. And many of them can be very small things we do, like in the body here, physical resilience. You've already learned 1 and perhaps 2 things this evening. So you can begin with some breaths, to slow, deep, rhythmic breaths, to calm that activation in the body. So remember, often things we're looking for are not complicated. They don't have to take a long time, but we want to know what they are and be able to pull them out in the moment when we need them. And so I have given each of you this blue card, or the 6 steps to emotional health. And so this is what we would call a public behavioral health tool. And so in my many years of practice, I came to see that people came in to work with me or have treatment with me when they were very distressed. And because we don't have any kind of National Health Service, we don't do as much prevention as is done in some other countries. And so many of the things that I'm talking to people about when they're depressed and anxious or have had trauma, the first time they come to see me, well, I'll tell you this, I give this to every single one of them, and we go over these things. But other places I work, or there's some primary care settings that use this. For those of you who know what Rikers Island is, if you watch Law & Order, the faculty member from the UF College of Medicine here is now the medical director at Rikers Island, I think of their juvenile division. And this blue card they're using as the centerpiece for their wellness program. So people come in thinking that they're going to talk to me about very complicated things, and I like to say insight is great, but it's overrated. And so insight by itself, understanding why something is, often doesn't produce the positive changes that are going to make that different. And we're not going to make something that's happened to someone already different. You know, we're always working right from where we are with what we've got. But these 6 items, each of them is what we call an evidence-based sort of strategy. So there's science to show us that these things are really helpful in terms of mood and anxiety. And so the first is sleep. And so sleep is my number one, and I hear it's really important for the management of MS as well. And so we recommend for adults to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. For kids, it's up to 10 or maybe a little bit more. So we want people to be off all electronics at least 30 minutes before they go to bed. Who does that in here? Anybody off electronics for a while before they go to bed? No, I'm getting some yeses and some nos. And so people I work with are often, let me grab my phone. I often work with people who are doing this in bed right before they go to sleep. You know, they're checking their email one more time or posting something to Instagram or whatever it may be. And I'm sure you all are such a smart group. I'm sure you know that the blue wave, some of you have probably heard that, the blue light wave, we don't see it as blue, but it suppresses our own melatonin. And melatonin is something our bodies produce on their own that helps with us falling asleep. But when we're seeing a lot of this blue light spectrum, our melatonin is not working at its best. And so that will help, or that will get in the way of us falling asleep. We also know that when we're watching, let's say we're watching TV or we're streaming something, and plenty of people have said to me that I need to watch TV to fall asleep, and I certainly believe they've trained themselves to do that. And perhaps it's because if I'm watching TV, I'm not thinking about the other things that are bothering me. And so I may fall asleep watching TV because I'm not doing that. But we know that because our eyelids are not blackout shades, that even with our eyes closed in front of these electronic devices, the light goes in through our eyelids, and the watching of it, even with our eyes open, is going in and sort of poking at our brain, you know, stimulating it. The lights, the sounds, all of that. And so while we may fall asleep, the quality of our sleep will not be as good. And I'm sure all of you have heard about REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. So people who have sleep apnea, it's difficult for them in many ways, but one of the problems is they don't get into that deep sleep. That's the sleep when you dream. And that's the sleep when your memories are consolidated as well. And so we need that deep restorative sleep. And so when we're on these electronic devices right before bed, it interferes with the quality of our sleep. So I may be sleeping, but I may not be in that deep restorative sleep. That is very important for all of us. So I recommend that people read a little bit before bed, and preferably a paper book. The only e-reader that may have some potential for this is the very first Kindle Paperwhite, which people promise me it's like an Etch-a-Sketch. I don't know. But anything that has a backlit, you know, the light kind of wavers, even if it doesn't look like it, and that light is stimulating the brain. So looking at a magazine, reading a book, something to get the worries and concerns of the day out of our mind so that we're in that relaxed state is very important. All right, that's sleep. Eating from the mental health point of view, and I picked up the magazine out there about eating for MS, which is so fascinating for me. But from the mental health point of view, we want people to eat at least 3 times a day, something with nutritional value, and not go long periods without eating. And so you all probably know when we're depressed or anxious, all those rhythms get disrupted, and so we'll sleep more or we'll sleep less. Our appetite will go up or it will go down. And so we're just asking from the emotional or the mood regulation point of view, people to eat on schedule. Eat something in the morning, something middle of the day, this is at least, and something in the evening. Then we have exercise, or better than exercise, physical activity that you just build into your life. Exercise and physical activity are mood regulating and anxiety reducing all on their own and are used as a prescription and a treatment for depression all on its own without even other things. Then daily pleasant activity, it turns out that that's incredibly powerful. So when we're depressed, there's a symptom of depression called anhedonia, and it comes from that word hedonism, about pleasure. So when we are depressed, the pleasure center in our brain is not working right, and so things that were pleasant in the past often do not feel pleasant anymore. So guess what we do? We stop doing them, and it ends up often being sort of this downward spiral. So we're looking around and saying nothing feels good, I'm not doing those things anymore, I've pulled in perhaps from my relationships. And so it's very important for all of us, even if we're not feeling it, although we can have a mental health day here and there, but to do something pleasant every single day and pay attention to it. Very important. Doesn't have to cost anything, you don't have to go somewhere special for it, and it does not have to take a long time. It could be petting your dog, it could be cooking, it could be reading. I would look for some variety because these are things that really build meaning for us in our lives. Then we have focused breathing or slow, deep, rhythmic breathing and mindfulness, and we're going to be doing some things like that here. So here are the 6 evidence-based strategies on the card, the blue card. On the back is a little chart where you can mark off for a week the different parts of that you're doing. And if you feel your mood, I showed you that resilient zone, if you feel your mood going down, I would say pull out your blue card and make sure that you're doing those things, if not having them in place to begin with. I think, so these are good strategies for all human beings. You don't have to have any particular situation going on. And so now let's do our resilient skill number 3, grounding. And so grounding is bringing awareness to places where your body is coming in contact with something supporting it. So you can do this in so many different ways. You might bring awareness to your feet, coming in contact with socks and shoes and pressure down to the floor. I see some of you are writing or using a utensil. Notice the sensations of the utensil in your hand, the coolness of a pen or a fork. You might notice some sensations of sitting at the upper legs, the hips, the lower back. You might put your hand on the table. Now this isn't a surface supporting the body, but you can also take one hand and do something like draw circles on the other hand. We're bringing our awareness, instead of round and round thought, we're bringing our awareness to what the hand feels like here. So grounding, noticing where the mind is, we've talked about that, awareness, and then bringing awareness somewhere on purpose. Another way that you can do this, I'm going to click through all these, is 5-4-3-2-1 grounding. And so here, and you can do these in any order, but you use your 5 senses. And so you might name 5 things that you see, Or maybe you name 5 blue things that you see, or maybe you just name blue things you see. 4 things you can touch, 3 things you hear. Again, you can do these in any order. 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste, or you can, for number 1, you can say 1 nice thing about yourself. That's always nice. But this is using the 5 senses to come to present moment instead of where we almost always are, caught up in our minds. And so I'm often in treatment mode where I'm doing interventions for people, and so we know that 3 of the most important targets for the treatment of depression are healthy lifestyle habits. That's what we just talked about, the eating, the sleeping, the physical activity, having some meaningful and purposeful activity. That just really varies person to person, but it's very important for all of us. And the last is reducing ruminating thought. That's that round and round thought we find ourselves in a lot. And so for anxiety, 2 of the most important targets are the same as the list for depression: healthy lifestyle habits and reducing that round and round thought. When we're anxious, we're often worrying about what's coming up. Sometimes we're thinking about what has already happened. Our goal is to be in our present moment as much as possible. Sometimes present moment is for planning ahead, and sometimes it is for thinking about the past, but it's not always for those things. Oh, the little cartoon over there, I think the person says, "What is that?" And you can see all the colored squiggles coming out of the other person's head there, and I think it says that's just my mind. Busy mind. Remember, our minds are made to wander, survey, keep us safe. That's what our equipment is. So here's some little treatment sayings. So don't believe everything you think. Just because you have a thought doesn't make it true or real or the thing you should be thinking about or that you need to think about right now. We can remember, as I mentioned earlier, we have habits of thought. And so what's a thought we're probably going to find ourselves in next? It's the ones we've already had. And we have habits of emotion. So I'm going to present this idea, resilient skill number 4, of structured processing. And so here's the question. How much should you think about a problem, a stressor, a grief, or a trauma? How much should you? Actually, if anyone would like to give an answer, you're welcome to. It was sort of a rhetorical question, but I welcome your wisdom. I have some ideas on this because many of the people who come to see me are stuck in these habits of mind loops, round and round and round. And so we'll draw this dimension of processing, or how much to think about something. And on this end over here on our slide, there's repression or denial, where the answer we're coming up with is never, right? I'm going to try to never think about that thing, which can be highly effective in the short run, but in the long run, it's like we've thrown out a boomerang and it's on its way back. It will come back. You might not recognize it, and it's gaining usually some steam. Okay, the other extreme is thinking about whatever it is so much you have the sense you're drowning in it, almost like you're scraping away at a wound over and over again. And so what we're talking about here is not about controlling thoughts or anything. I never teach people to be trying to control anything. We're always trying to manage it. Control really suggests we have all of the factors impacting something in our own hands, and I don't think we do. So here's that dimension. And so often we're maybe not thinking about it so much that it's all the time. We may be in a little bit from that, but if it's a really important issue, we feel like we're probably supposed to be thinking about it. Maybe not at work. We give ourselves a break at work, but the second we walk out the door, here it is. And so our sweet spot is toward the other end. I put it right here, where we think about whatever it is that has come up in a way that has a beginning and an end on any given occasion. That's why I've put a box up here. And I usually say no more than about 30 minutes. It could be 5 minutes or 1 minute. It could be 30 seconds if you've thought about it a lot. but you think about that thing in a way that has a beginning and an end, and this part's really important. Like we read before we go to sleep as a transition to get the worries and the concerns of the day out of our mind, after we've thought about some important thing and we're imagining we're going to put it in a box on the shelf, take a little break from it, we want to use a transitional activity there. So we might read or play a game on your phone or do a crossword puzzle or something that requires your attention to bring you back into right now, right wherever you are. And then when whatever the issue is continues to come up because you thought about it on purpose, you can tell yourself, take a breath and say, that's not for right now. Take a breath when it comes up again and say, that's not for right now. It's not for never, but not for always either. And so we're going to do a little brief mindfulness practice now that everyone has finished eating, just maybe about 5 minutes. And so maybe before we do that, perhaps, let's see what happens. Let's see if this is still on my phone. All right, let's breathe to music for about 10 seconds, just so you get a taste of that. So I'm going to play this. Let's see what happens. And your invitation is to breathe slow, deep, and rhythmically without breath holding, with the exhales a little bit longer than the inhales. Here we go. Let's see if it works.
Let us pause in life's pleasures to count its many tears, while we all sob.
Just a little taste of that. So it can help to have something to put our mind on. So now we're going to do our little mindful awareness practice. And this is our resilient skill number 5. So before we do this, let's use another one of our skills, and I'm going to invite you to notice how things are in the body. Again, feel free if there's something that's distressing you to take your awareness elsewhere. But notice how things are in the mind and the body, and I'm going to invite you, and believe me, as Dr. Lewis at UF Psychiatry, I'm ringing these bells all day long. So this is a clinical professional thing. So I'm going to ring these bells 3 times at the beginning and 3 times at the end of our practice. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, but each of you is in charge of yourselves. And so if you don't want to close your eyes, that's fine. Find a non-moving point, not on another person, to let your gaze rest gently on. My kindergarten teacher friend who teaches mindfulness to her students says, keep your eyes in your own body space. All right, so I'm going to ring these bells and just follow along. Your mind will wander. Notice it. Then bring awareness back to the practice of my words. Here we go. Sitting in a dignified, upright, and comfortable posture as best you can, whatever works for you today. Take just a moment to bring awareness to the breath, if that works for you. The in-breath and the out-breath as an anchor for your present moment awareness. If the breath isn't comfortable, find another place to bring the awareness to as an anchor. But if you're using the breath, you might notice the breath at the nose or the chest or the abdomen or perhaps the whole body. Pick one of those places and as needed or desired or instructed, bring awareness there throughout our practice. And so now when you're ready, take just a moment to bring awareness to the contents of your mind, noticing whatever you may find there, thoughts of other times and places or what we've been talking about, thoughts of sounds in the room or outside of the room, or maybe a focus on physical sensation of some kind, or other thoughts or images. Allow yourself to notice those thoughts or streams of thought or images without being swept away by them, without growing them or developing them further, bringing awareness to those thoughts, and then gently letting go of them without judging them or yourself or struggling with them, leaving the thoughts to be just as they are without need for them to be different in any way, and gently bringing awareness on perhaps to another thought or then back to the breath. And when you find that your mind has wandered during the practice or in your day, that is the nature of the mind to wander. Allow yourself to notice the wandering thoughts just as best you can. Gently then bring awareness back to the practice or present moment out in your day, 5 times or 50 times or however many you may find those wandering thoughts. And if you like, you can continue slow, deep, and rhythmic breathing without breath holding throughout the practice. And if those exhales are just a little bit longer than the inhales, it will stimulate the soothing part of the nervous system. And so noticing thoughts without being swept away by them, without growing them or developing them further. And in our practice, taking just a moment to bring awareness to your emotions or moods, noticing whatever emotion or emotions you find within yourself today. You might find one or more than one. You might find happiness or sadness, anger or fear, frustration or contentment or other emotions, but allowing the awareness to rest gently on one emotion that you find within. Notice how you experience that emotion, which may be as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Notice any sensations or thoughts that accompany that emotion. And whatever you found then, gently let go of the awareness of that emotion and its thoughts and sensations without judging it or yourself or struggling with it. Leaving it to be just as it is, however it is, without need for it to be different in any way. And gently bring awareness back to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Breath by breath, present moment awareness. And if during our practice or out in your day or life, you become aware of a thought that's distressing or painful, or you become aware of a sensation in the body that's unpleasant or painful, or you become aware of an emotion that's difficult or anxiety-producing or painful, allow awareness of a thought or emotion or sensation on the in-breath and soften into it on the out-breath. This thought, this sensation, this emotion is already here. Let me notice it. And then with kindness and gentleness, gently let go of the thought or emotion or sensation, leaving it to be just as it is without need for it to be different, letting go of it without judgment or struggle, bringing awareness in our practice back to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, breath by breath, present moment awareness. And in your own time, when you're ready, you might gently blink your eyes open if they were closed, and take just a moment to notice. We'll use that awareness skill. How are things in the mind, and how are things in the body? So there's a lot of science to show us that mindfulness practices have direct physical benefit. And so they're on a whole range of physical health problems. The science is in on a lot of that. And so I just want to tell you, we did that tiny mindfulness practice, and you might think of it as meditation or not, but I'm not telling you all to go out and meditate unless that's what you do and you love. Just know that sitting meditation is a formal mindfulness practice. Almost every religion has contemplative practices there, like in Catholicism, the rosary is a present moment practice. And there are all those mindful movement practices that we know are so beneficial to us: yoga, qigong, tai chi, martial arts. And you can do anything mindfully and mindlessly. I don't know if you've ever driven somewhere and gone where you didn't mean to go, but you used to work in that building or something like that, you know. Or you didn't remember anything between, you know, where you started to where you got. And so we are often like that little cartoon wrapped up in our mind. And it is understandable, but the ability to be more present moment, to experience our lives and those we love in a more present way, is a skill that we can all develop. And so we have discussed these 5 resilient skills, helping us to be more strong and stable and to bend but not break. Focused breathing, again, 1 or 2 breaths can make a huge difference. Awareness, that's noticing. Grounding, and you can do that with your 5 senses or in the body. Structured processing, how much should we think about something? We tend to go to either extreme. And then these mindfulness practices. And I gave you both the blue card, the 6 steps to emotional health, and I gave you a little white half sheet that has me leading a mindfulness practice at the UF Department of Psychiatry website at the top. I use this, again, as a clinical tool for lots of different things. There's some websites here, and then a bunch of phone apps. They're all free. A couple of them have, after you use them for 7 days, I think Calm.com and Headspace. After about 7 days, they want you to pay something. But there's plenty of free stuff, including Insight Timer, which has 20,000 mindfulness practices. And so it's a lot, but you can say how much time you have. They have 400 sleep practices, including something called sleep stories now, which have people who have lovely voices reading things like Alice in Wonderland. That's my favorite. He's got a Scottish brogue. I began to try it out because people were telling me about it, and then I woke up. So it was pretty good. All right, and so we've talked about resilience. It's important for all of us and each of us. As I mentioned, our breath, our 5 senses, and that idea of bringing awareness to something we're grounding it to are your most powerful tools. And I could teach, you know, I like to say I could teach you to do psychological backflips because I have all this training and things like that, but your breath, your 5 senses, and grounding are your most, I think, your most powerful tools, and you have them with you at all times. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or at least try. Thank you.